So it is time for lunch, but I want to let you know that for people who are streaming at home, we're going to show a segment that we had on a few years ago, and it might be of interest to you as well, about Lieutenant Walter Manning, who was a Baltimore-born man. He became a Tuskegee Airman, with a lot of difficulty. And he met a very brutal and untimely end in the closing weeks of World War II. So we learned the story from our friends at Lynching Sites Project of Memphis. Here's the segment. It was from 3 years ago, I think. It's about 30 minutes long. When you see that it's over, lunch is over. So please report. All righty? Thank you so much. We're going to move on now and tell you a story that just kind of landed in my lap a few weeks ago, and it was just stunning to me. I got a call from John Ashworth, who is with the Lynching Sites Project of Memphis, and he said that he has a story that may interest me, and it was about a Baltimore-born man who overcame considerable hardship and very humble circumstances to become a Tuskegee Airman. But his life ended, tragically, and in the waning days of World War II. And here to tell us about this Lieutenant Manning's life, we're going to have Colonel Harry Stewart, who is himself a Tuskegee Airman and was a friend of Walter Manning and flew with him on that same mission where he was captured. And Barbara Williams, who has chased down the story of Manning's life down to every corner of the earth, and John Ashworth, who kindly told me about the story. And I believe it's John's birthday today, so happy birthday, John.
Yes. Thank you.
So I want to start, before we hear from them, just want to start this. This is, Jenny Lyles, who's our historian and researcher extraordinary. She was able to dig up, this is the birth certificate of Lieutenant of Henry Manning, and it shows that he was born on, I think I can't see it now because these other things are here, May 3rd in 1920. Yeah, there we go. And this is really how it started. Now I'm going to allow our guests to tell us how it all happened. Barbara, or
John.
John, yes.
Good morning, Will, and good morning to all the panelists and to all the people attending. And thanks for having us from the Lynching Sites Project. Very quickly, the Lynching Sites Project started in 2015 from a speech made by Brian Stevenson. And we have documented in Shelby County alone over 35 lynchings that took place in Shelby County. We know that there were a little over 500 lynchings and near lynchings in the state of Tennessee. But the other thing I'd like to say about this is that about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years ago, Barbara told me about Lieutenant Manning, and I asked her if she would do the research and do a presentation to the Lynching Sites Project about the life and she did an extraordinary presentation that you're going to hear in a few minutes. But I want to make just one very quick observation, turn it over to her. A historian has said that as Europe developed into conflicts in 1939, one historian has written that by exporting arms to the democratic countries, the United States hoped to become the arsenal of democracy. What that historian did not go on to say that one of the other things that the United States exported was this idea of the lynching of African Americans. And that, of course, as you will hear, is a fate that befell Lieutenant Manning. And I would go on to add that as I think about his story, then I think about the story of African-American servicemen during the Revolutionary War, during the Civil War, during World War I, during World War II, on down to present day. And so I think in many ways, Lieutenant Manning, who is no longer with us, and Colonel Stewart, who is with us today, represents the essence of all the African-American soldiers that have fought for freedom while defending their own freedom. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Will. And congratulations on being placed in the Lewis Museum in Baltimore. That's really a nice thing. The birth certificate that you saw says that he was born Walter Peyton Manning was born in Johns Hopkins University, hospital there in Baltimore. The next time we see him is in Philadelphia. There's a 1930 census which places him living in a home without his mother, but with a sister of the mother and the sister's husband. We have no records as of yet as to where he went to school, but all of the addresses that we have found, and there are 3 in Philly, are from West Philly. He registered for the draft July the 1st, 1941. He would have been 21 years and a couple of months old. And I found a description on his registration card. He had brown hair, brown eyes. He was of light brown complexion, and he was 162 pounds, 5 feet 10. He failed his first physical after he registered. And why? He had a hammer toe. Now, if you do not know what a hammer toe is, it might be called a mallet toe, but it basically says the 4 toes of your hand, usually one of those toes will be constricted. The tendons or the ligaments or the muscles just don't extend and flexed. So you end up with one foot, that's permanently in this position. And one of the ways that you can get rid of that is to have surgery. So the Army registration says that Manning had held at least 2 jobs. One was a locker boy in a Philadelphia, Montgomery County country club. And he also was a machinist. I don't know what his salary would have been as a locker boy. I certainly hope the tips were good, but he had the surgery. He was successful. He took the exam for the U.S. Army Air Force for pilot training. He had always wanted to fly, according to Colonel Stewart. The minimum on that test to pass was 83. The max was 150. He scored 119. So on April 1st, in March 15th of 1943, he was accepted into the U.S. Army Air Force as a pilot. And by, and by August of 44, he was transferred to Ramitelli Air Force Base in southern Italy. On April 1st, 1945, a year had passed, and he had completed about 50 sorties, a mission escorting bombers coming back successfully. On this particular April 1st, he shot down one German firefighter, but he was hit by another. And out of the 7 men, the 7 pilots who were flying that mission that day, 3 were shot. One plane crashed, a Tuskegee Airman crashed and was killed. A second one, the plane was hampered, but the pilot was able to fly out and land in a friendly air base where today, some time ago, it was called Yugoslavia, and he was able to get back to Ramitelli. The third plane was that of Second Lieutenant Walter Peyton Manning. He was able to bail out. The plane crashed. He was picked up on the ground by Austrians who had decided to kill him because that's what the German philosophy was. And the philosophy had an official title. It was called Flieger, Lynch, Justice. Flieger is flyer or aviator. Lynch is lynch, I guess in anybody's language. And justice is spelled with a Z, but it still means the lack of the proper justice. So he was turned over to the local police in an up-and-coming town called Linz. That was where they were in the country of Linz, having flown in from Ramitelli, and they were on their way back. Linz is about in today's train, it's about an hour, maybe an hour and a half west of Vienna. It's north of the Alps. So he was placed with the Austrian police. He was held for at least 2 nights, and probably either the late second night or possibly the early morning, 2 German officers entered the jail, and they had fake papers which allowed Manning to be released to them. They took him outside. They strung him up by a rope. He hung by a lamppost for several hours until one of the workmen there at the airport where he was being held came and they took him down. What you're going to see next is a video. And the land where you see this video is the spot where he actually was hung at the Linz Horsering Airport. The Austrian Department of Defense and Sport, this is the National Department of the Defense and Sport, had initiated some 20 years ago what happened to approximately 1,700 Allied air crewmen who were shot down in Austria alone, but survived the crash. And they were able to find that Second Lieutenant Walter Peyton Manning, a victim of Flieger Lynch justice, but was a victim of the actual rope lynching, not just being shot or killed or bludgeoned in some other way. So they decided to honor him. In 2015, they found this information. In 2018, which is when the video you're going to see is April 1st, which is 73 years to the date that Colonel Stewart and Manning and 5 other pilots went on this last sortie for Manning. They decided to honor his horrific sacrifice in 2018. The other thing I want you to know about this video is that until this video was done, even though the research had been completed 3 years before, until the video was done, no one knew of the lynching by a rope. Family didn't know, excuse me, they just knew that he had been shot down in Austria. The person whom you're going to hear speaking is Colonel retired Harry Thaddeus Stewart Jr. At age 97, I think I'm correct, Colonel Stewart, that you are one of only 12 surviving Tuskegee pilots, and eight. And you are one of several more of all the Tuskegee Airmen who held different positions within the U.S. Army Air Force. You will see only Austrian military in this video because it is at the spot where Manning was hung. And there is a flyover. He was a pilot after all, but you will not see that. But you will see and hear Colonel Stewart speak about Manning and the reason why they're there today. So Will, if you will.
I would be happy to. I wondered if right before I do that, if I could ask Colonel Stewart a question, which is, how did you learn about what happened to Lieutenant Manning?
Well, actually, what happened was the mission that we went on at that time to Austria, and that happened to be on a Sunday, April 1st, 1945. Lieutenant Manning was listed as missing after that mission, and it was years later, quite a few years later, that an investigation had taken place, and his remains were discovered, and also through depositions of people who were witnesses at the time there testified as to the manner of death that he was meted with in Austria.
It's a horrible story. So let's watch the video now. Thank you.
Well, we're doing here memorializing Walter Manning. And it was nearly this date, 73 years ago, that we were on a fighter sweep in this area of the country here, and that's when Walter got shot down, and later on, about 3 days later, met his demise at the being captured by a mob and executed at the time. Name is Harry Stewart, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force, retired. I met Lieutenant Manning sometime before that, maybe a year and a half before that. both went in the service together, and we went to the same field where we trained at. I joined up with him in the same squadron when I went overseas and joined him in the 301st Fighter Squadron in Ramitelli, Italy at the time. Manning was quite a guy, you know, and he wanted to fly very, very badly. He wanted to get his pilot's wings and do his duty for his country, and I guess he did all he wanted to do as far as the flying was concerned. That was what he was chiefly after. He wanted to be a fighter pilot. Well, it certainly means a great deal to me, being, you know, one of the 6 pilots who flew along with him when he met his demise. But the other thing is that the people of the United States know nothing about what actually happened to Walter Manning. And I'm hoping with all of this that we can take the story back to the United States and let the people know what had happened to him.
Company! Hey! Boom! Listen!
The biggest thing was the extent that the government had gone to memorialize the memory of Walter Manning, but also the display, the pageantry that they put on at the time there was just beyond any expectations that I had. And now the memorial that we see that stands over to the side of us is quite a tribute to the memory of Manning. Today we turn out to be allies, and quite comfortable allies. I think that he would be very forgiving and of the demise that he had, and I think that he would be very pleased with the memorial that had been named in his honor.
If I may, I'd like to read the English translation of the plaques you just saw where Colonel Stewart saluted. This is the spot where Second Lieutenant Walter P. Manning was murdered on the night, either the 3rd or the 4th of April, 1945. Walter P. Manning was born in 1920 in Philadelphia, and when he grew up, he was a member of the American 332nd Fighter Group, 15th U.S. Army Air Force. His airplane was shot down just south of Linz on the 1st of April, 1945. National Socialist officials and members of the German Air Force organized a hunt that ended with the hanging of Manning. Manning is one of the countless victims from the so-called aviator justice that the Nazi injustice regime unleashed against Allied aircraft crew in 1944. And then there's a space, and then they say, with an exclamation point at the end, they say, honor his memory.
Barbara, thank you so much. And you know, this work that you've done to document all this, you are honoring his memory, and I can't thank you enough for that. And I want to say before we just go on is that, you know, if we get this installation, well, I should say when we get this installation at the Lewis Museum, I want to be more positive about that. But we will certainly make a place to honor Lieutenant Manning there. It's too important. It's such a tragic story, and the dedication that he showed, the determination to become a flyer, and yet to meet not only the end that he met, but the indifference from his country is tragic. I wanted to ask you, Colonel Stewart, what do you remember about him? What kind of a man was he? And go ahead.
Well, he certainly was a very likable chap, and we had the same endeavors as far as wanting to be pilots were concerned. And I had flown a number of missions with him before. He was a few classes ahead of me as far as graduation as a pilot was concerned, and therefore he had more missions than I did. I'd like to mention that the total number of missions to fly as a fighter pilot overseas at the time there before you were sent home on rehabilitation was 50 missions. And he had 50 missions, or might have exceeded that by maybe 1 or 2 missions. But he certainly was on register to go home at that time there. And if it wasn't for that fateful flight that he was on April 1st there, he would very likely be with us today. I'd like to also say that the memorial that took place in Austria took place April 1st, 2018, which was the 73rd anniversary of the demise of Walter, or the time that he went down. So in answer to your question before, as the timing of this was concerned, it was 73 years before he was fully recognized and given that memorial in Austria. And at the time there, as far as the lynching was concerned, is the depositions that were taking place by a number of the witnesses to the event. Anyway, I sort of lost the trend right there, but anyway, that was the 73rd anniversary, and sometime later, through a lot of research by both the Austrians and the American Graves Commission as to what had happened factually as far as Lieutenant Manning was concerned.
So I also know that you were very instrumental in making that day happen, and I wanted to know, I wanted to ask you why this was so important to you.
Well, it's important to me because I was surprised to find out here's a foreign country. Certainly, it was one of our adversaries at the time there, but a foreign country who recanted and took the moral courage to recognize the indignity that Walter Manning suffered. And they tried their best to pay some type of tribute to him by giving this a memorial. Yet, this was unknown by the people of the United States. A few people in the government intelligence service knew about it, but none of the people of the citizens of the United States, including the Black diaspora, knew anything of what was going on. And I just felt that it just would be so fitting to have some type of memorial given this day in the United States here for the dedication to his service, the citizenry, that type of thing as far as he was concerned.
Barbara, you mentioned a book that...
I do, and I just put that in the chat. Colonel Stewart has written a book called Soaring to Glory, a Tuskegee Airman's first-hand account of World War II. And I also wanted to put in the middle of typing, another book. There is something called Missing in Action, Failed to Return. It is a PDF, and it lists all of the something under 1,700 deaths.
Here it is.
There you go. Of airmen, Allied airmen, who were shot down, survived the crash, but somehow under Fliegerlied's justice were killed before they were to be turned over a POW system and all of that. But the first 16, 17 pages are the philosophy of why the Austrian government did what it did, because it not only did this event on April 1st, 2018, but they've also done museum pieces, because they found that not only is the World War II participant memory being lost, but people who have heard the stories are beginning to forget, and it seems to be purposeful forgetfulness. And Austria wanted to remind people that these 1,700, plus the ones who went home directly, are the reason why Austria is free today. I worked in Austria one summer, in fact, in this very same town, and I remember my boss telling me, Barbara, we never thought we'd get rid of the Russians, because from 45 to 50, Russia took over Austria and finally were forced out. But she said, I never thought we'd get rid of them. And those are the memories that they want people to know how tenuous anybody's national security actually is.
It can't escape notice that, and Nick Creary actually wrote it in the comments, that it's more than ironic that the Austrian government has done more to memorialize and apologize for the victim of lynching than the U.S. government has. John, there was a question for you as well about the connection between the NSDAP, fascist racial ideology and white supremacy practices in the United States. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, let me speak to that. In fact, if you saw me, I was looking for an article that I had on my desk, because I also subscribe to newspapers.com, and there was an article that appeared in 1936, and what the article said was Hitler had agents in the United States that already had to exterminate African Americans if they had won the war. But the other comment I want to make on, there's a very interesting book out, and I can't think of the author's name now, but the title of the book is Hitler's American Model. And that book very clearly articulates how it was that the Nazis looked at Jim Crow practices in the United States to come up with their plan for what they were going to do with Jews in Germany. But yes, there is that connection between the Nazis and white supremacy. It's all based on the same thing. And they actually, as a matter of fact, when you read the book, Hitler's American Model, what you find out is that some of the practices that the United States had doing Jim Crow.
We lost your audio there, John.
I'm sorry. No, as I started to say, when you read the book, one of the things that you'll find out is that the book, Hitler's American Model, is that the Nazis even thought some of the practices that the United States had went a bit too far insofar as racism is concerned. So yes, there is a definite connection between Nazism and white supremacy. It's all tied together.
There was a related question from Pat Halley about asking whether or not the Nazis lynched white and black soldiers, or was it go ahead, Barbara.
The hearsay is that yes, they did. And there is another book out, came out in I'm sorry, I don't remember it, last year, I guess, 2020. And the author, works in a German university, but he used some of the same research areas that the other two authors of Missing in Action researched. And he found, and other people, and I think Colonel Stewart has said over the years, people have found cases or have heard of cases where people were lynched with a rope, both white and black, but they haven't been verified.
Interesting.
May I say that a total of 7 black pilots from the 332nd Fighter Group were listed as missing in the book Missing in Action here. And some of them, they still haven't found their remains there. They still continue to be listed as missing in action, but there is one that I had mentioned to you, Barbara, I believe, that we had just gotten recent word that he had been pitchforked to death by a group of people. So there was others other than Walter Manning there that probably met a rather horrible death there as far as the being captured is concerned.
Well, I can't thank you enough bringing us this incredibly important and sad story. It needs to be known, and we're honored to have all of you join us today. And Colonel Stewart, we thank you, of course, for everything and for your service and for being here and for standing up for your friend. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Very much. I really appreciate it. By the way, I don't know, for those of you who may have watched that segment again with Colonel Stewart, Harry Stewart, that was from 3 years ago. Colonel Stewart earlier this year celebrated his 100th birthday. Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. And I thought it was an apt story to look at again with Veterans Day next week. So, well, welcome back. I hope everyone had enough to eat, and we'll continue to eat quietly out there. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. It's been pointed out to me that I have neglected to identify myself today. So, just for the record, I am Will Schwarz, and I'm the president of the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project. Cut that out. Enough. So, earlier today, we spoke a little bit about the need to find ways to keep community engaged in the work of racial reconciliation. And we're looking for ways, particularly that go beyond the community remembrance projects that, that are so effective in attracting attention to begin with and enlisting support. And then one of the most creative rather, and ambitious and critical, I would add, and creative and ambitious projects that we've seen along those lines is a project called the Road to Freedom. And it's going to be a hike and bike trail that connects the Hampton Mansion, which is a former plantation, and with Historic East Towson, which is an historic black neighborhood in Towson that was founded by former slaves who had been manumitted from the the Hampton Mansion. So it's a brilliant idea, and it's the brainchild of our next speaker, the brilliant Nancy Goldring, who is a member of our board as well as the president of the Northeast Towson Improvement Association. And Nancy is here. You just advance.
I have to run my own slides.
Huh? Yeah. Oh, do you want me to do it for you? No.
Hello, everybody. And I, too, am a regular at not letting anybody know who I am. I just jump up and start talking like, hi. So, as Will said, I am Nancy Goldring, president of the Northeast Towson Improvement Association, 7th generation East Towsonite. My family has been in Towson, documented in Towson since 1791, formerly enslaved at the Hampton Plantation, currently known as the Hampton National Historic Site. The first property to be inducted into the nation's legitimate, legal, official historic preservation canon for its Georgian architecture. And so, as fabulous as it may be, that was just a small slither of the story. And it's funny how you never say what you plan to say, right? So let me start here, because I will. So this is just an aerial view of the east side of Towson. And so I'm going to finish my point in a second, but since I had the nerve to push the button on my slides, I may as well explain that I am here to talk with you about mapping the road to freedom from Hampton Plantation to Historic East Towson. So, as Will said, this project came out of, as so many advancements in the African American space, controversy, challenge, a commitment to preserve and protect the East Towson community. And so, out of yet another hammering with encroachment and erasure, we were faced with, how are we gonna, what would we do? What should we do? So the question came to me, well, Nancy, if you don't want Red Maple Place, and let me just give you a tiny piece of background on Red Maple Place, because yes, affordable housing is a critical issue across the country, largely as a result of the practices in zoning and you name it, development, those things that are designed to make the country great in places. So I said, well, I'm coming into, just like the young man who was up here earlier, I'm coming into a much deeper knowledge of my own history in 2020. Actually, the issue predated 2020, but to really be able to connect all these dots is 2020. It's the completion of an ethnographic study that was completed, there you are, completed at the end of 2020 by the National Park Service. And it was an ethnographic study, which means we have to study the people that were here. So if I roll that back, and I'm not going to forget I only have 10 minutes. If I roll that back, so you get an ethnographic study at Hampton, not because Hampton had a come to Jesus moment about its history, but because Hampton is a federally owned property. And federally owned properties have studies done. And the studies that are done are completely connected to the original use of the land. And so because Hampton was originally a slave plantation, 25,000 acres of plantation space that would take you from Towson to White Marsh, and for those of you who are local, that's a heck of a piece of territory. If you look up 25,000 acres, it's actually a few thousand acres larger than a township. And when I put it in Google, Google says about the size of Manhattan. So certainly at various places in its history, upwards of 500-600 slaves. The only reason that the number of slaves is unclear is because there was a period where the slaves the enslaved did not have surnames. And so how you knew one person from another, especially at the level of children, is, so I'm Nancy. If I had children, right? Yeah, or it would be Nancy's Mary, Nancy's Charles. And then later on, surnames come along. So, let me get myself together. So I'm saying, okay, I'm trying to figure this out now because I'm saying, okay, we have a federally owned property up the street. We have a full-blown descendant community down here where the people are still here. Aside from anything that has happened over the years, the people are still here. I'm a 7th-generation descendant. Miss Davis lives in a house, like you can see in the wintertime, you can see her house from my house through the woods. And, I'm just starting to think about the people. Miss Genevieve was born at Hampton, although slavery was over when she was born there. Her father still worked for the Ridgeleys. and she was hatched on that land. And she was alive in East Towson. She ran us home and away from her grandchildren. Like, get away from here, right? So it was all of a sudden, it was alive for me. And so much of our history, my history, the nation's history, has been sort of flat. It's like these things happened. But when I come into this knowledge that my family had been enslaved right up the street from where we live now, all of a sudden it starts doing like this. I'm like, oh, it gets real. It's like you can touch it. And as I mentioned to some students recently, I said, you know, I don't really look at history maybe in the normal sense. I said, I look at it in terms of how many years can I reach back? How far back can I say I touched a person who lived? And my great-grandparents, my great-grandfather was born in 1900. And so I remember him. He brought me cans of pennies. He smoked a pipe. You know, I just remember this guy. He was hilariously funny, incredibly engaging human being. So I'm like, wow, I'm not 60. I'm like 124, right? So because I feel like I have the momentum of all of that at my immediate disposal. So I say all that to say, I'm thinking about this history and I'm saying, if this was anybody else's history, there would already be a trail. There would be a trail connecting the origin, this territory, to a community. And so when the woman challenged me and said, well, what would you, if you don't want this, what do you want? I said, well, why isn't there a trail? And the kicker was, she is, at her core, an environmentalist. And so she loved the idea. And so what it is, as Will mentioned, is a cycling and pedestrian trail that connects over 13 sites of historic significance that take us from Hampton National Historic Site into East Towson. And every last place, so let me just clear this up. This is an image, however cropped, of Hampton Plantation. In the middle is an aerial shot of Goucher College's campus, and then the sign that lets you know you're headed into East Towson. Because I only had 10 minutes. You only get one slide, right? I show you these three because they are the significant points along the landscape. You go from Hampton. Hampton had been connected to, Goucher had been connected to Hampton as it was the Epsom Farm. You could, before the highway, you could walk right across the land over to Goucher's campus, or what later became Goucher's campus. And it's important to me, as I'm sure it's important to Goucher, to acknowledge that Goucher is on the property not until, the 1920s? So Goucher didn't keep slaves. They come along after the fact. So they are on the lovely way that Kent Devereaux, the president, says, we are exploring the history of what happened on the land. And so Goucher has a lime kiln, a spring house, a farm foundation, and seemingly most powerfully, a depression in the ground that you could easily miss, which is the original entrance from what is now Delaney Valley Road. And I kid you not, the first time I stepped on it, Debbie Harner graciously took me on a tour, and I stepped on it, and I was like, whoa. And I'm woo-woo, but I ain't that woo-woo, right? I'm not gonna tell you I'm not woo-woo because I would be lying. Because I think you gotta be a little bit woo-woo to be alive sometimes. So I said, whoa, something just happened there, but I don't want to talk about it. So So these are the three primary landscapes. And you only go from historic Hampton to historic East Towson because you're following a historical timeline, not because one place is more important in the conversation than the other. So this, because I only had 10 minutes, is a capturing of many of the sites that you would see if you were traveling on the Road to Freedom Trail. So you have Hampton, you have Mount Olive Baptist Church. Mount Olive Baptist Church is a church started by my great-great-grandfather, James H. Williams, who came here from Westmoreland County, Virginia, and was one of 3 ministers who started Mount Olive Baptist Church. However, he was the only one who could read and write his name. And his name remains on the cornerstone of the church today. Across the street from the church, after you pass the detention center, that was supposed to come to East Towson, let me just say that. There is a cemetery. Cemetery is Pleasant Rest Cemetery, the only known African-American cemetery in the area. And, okay, so over here, Sandy Bottom. So that house is a house that was in Sandy Bottom, obviously, a long time ago. However, the thing to know is that now Sandy Bottom is the York Road Business Corridor in Towson. It is no more. So when the, speculators came through, and so be clear, not all of the land that is the York Road Business Corridor was owned by Black people. They lived there, and most of the housing was probably what we would categorize today as slum property. However, the ones that owned property were sold. An interesting story called, well, you let us sell us this property, and then when we finish building it up, you can come back. So I said, you're gonna sell me your house for $600, and then you're gonna come back and find out that the new houses are $12,000, and we already know that the bank isn't gonna lend you any money. So now the community is gone. And just keep in mind, whenever you see a Black church sitting someplace where it doesn't seem like it's supposed to go, there was probably a community there, because you don't build a church unless churches are built in service to communities, and they're built in such a way where you could walk to church. And so my grandmother used to take me to church, and she would say, oh, it's a daggone shame what happened down here. And I said, what are you talking about, Grandma? She says, well, I used to walk down here. I remember I used to walk down here and go to Dots and have breakfast before I walked up the hill to church. And I'm saying to myself, walk down where? Where did Aunt Dot live? Because Aunt Dot lived on Fairmont Avenue in my lifetime. And she said, oh, people live down here. They lived all over this place. And so I heard that all my young life, and then I come into this history, and it's piecing together. You're piecing it together. And so then you have Howard Cooper Memorial over there, the lynching, the story of lynching in not just Baltimore County, but in Towson, where these things, let me just tell you, do not happen in Towson. That is the, what do I want to call it? That is the dominating narrative of the landscape. Towson is one of those places where only good things happen to good people. And so surely a lynching would not have occurred in Towson. And so we have Howard Cooper's memorial out in front of the old jail where he was hanged, or lynched, I'm sorry. And across the street, a recent victory is the county has aligned with the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project to establish the Truth and Community Park. So thank you for this work. Thank you for this work. It doesn't always look like it, but stuff is happening, right? So then you have St. James AUMP Church, which is the oldest church in Towson. It's 163 years old this year. They just had an anniversary service last weekend. You have the Carver Colored High School, which was one of only 3 schools in the area where African-American children could go to school. And my grandmother she told me a story one time about a guy who missed the bus, whatever the transportation was, to get to school, and he walked. And it took him all day to get to Towson. But that was his commitment to coming to school. If our kids have to walk to school now, you calling out for work. Oh my God, he can't walk. It's amazing. It's amazing. So I'm skipping the Jacob House. So over here, as I mentioned, Pleasant Rest Cemetery, Parker House. The Parker House was discovered, again, during a moment of development. Some people from Hampton, some kind of preservation organization that I cannot remember the correct name of right now. They heard about it. They walked over with a mallet and hit the wall and exposed the logs and the chinking. And that is the Parker House. You have the Mount Calvary AME Church, which is the youngest of the 3. They're all over 130 years old. So that alone will speak to how long East Towson has been in place. Here you have the Pride of Towson Lodge, which I must say, thanks to the Baltimore County's, a grant from Baltimore County and a legislative bond bill submitted by Mary Washington and Delegate Forbes, funding is now in place to restore the Pride of Towson Lodge, which is sort of the social hub of the community. And then you have the Jacob House. And the Jacob House has become this place. It too is a cabin. It is believed to be the first house built in East Towson by African Americans. Daniel Harris settled East Towson, you may as well say, and he connects all 3 landscapes. We are looking for other people who do the same thing. So what does that mean? Daniel Harris was enslaved at Hampton, and by literally a sheer act of providence and not another birthday, he was freed. Because when you were freed from Hampton in the before manumission, it was a staggered manumission. You had to be between the ages of 24 and 45, I think for women, 28 and 45 or 46 for men. I try not to think about it, but that tells me something too, right? So, but if you have children and your children are over 2 years old, they remain enslaved. So you get a community like East Towson out of necessity because, let's face it, Pennsylvania was free and so was Baltimore City. So instinctually you would say, man, I'm out of here. I'm going to Baltimore or I'm going to Pennsylvania. They stayed right in Towson because if you were over 45, 46 years old, you couldn't be freed because you were considered to have been past the age of any usefulness. Oh my God, right? So now it's considered the prime of your life. But when your life is beaten out of you, worked out of you from can't see morning to can't see night, 46 is old. 24, I'm saying to myself, 24, but if you are being breeded from the age of, say, 12, 13 to 24 is a lifetime for a woman. You done had, some of them, 5, 10, 14 children. My great-grandmother's mother, Margaret, who was enslaved at Hampton. Let me just say this before I tell you what I'm going to tell you. Sissy is a cousin. She lives in Harvard at Grace. Annie is my great-grandmother's mother. She's born in 1880. I say to my grandmother, Grandma, who was your grandma? She says, oh, Mama's mother's name was Annie. We thought Annie was a slave, but Mama never talked about it. Well, the math says that Annie was born in tough times, but she was not a slave, 1880. Well, I say to Sissy, who's a cousin, a product of Annie's marriage to Samuel Mills, I said, what do you know about, Annie? And she says, oh, I heard her mother was mean. I said, she had 18 children. Find me a mother of 18 children who isn't a little upset, right? And you just continually try to get your head around these things. So the Jacob House used to be situated on Pennsylvania Avenue. It had become, over the years, the kitchen of this family home. And so back in the, I think, mid-90s or so, 1998, there was a fire. The whole house went up in flames except for the Jacob House. Now, if you come to East Towson and you do a tour with me, just so you know, as you learn this history, you evolve, right? So I said, whoa, the ancestors really wanted their story told. And then I get the occasion to see a video on trees. And so it talked about how the older a tree is, the slower its wood burns. And so I thought, oh, so it is a true testament to how old the place is. Now, do I think that the ancestors are determined that their history is going to get told? Absolutely. I believe that too. Like I told you, I ain't all the way out there, but I definitely have some woo-woo for you, right? So I go to the Jacob House to clean it up, to do interviews with people who want to talk about the community. And I went there the other day because I needed help. And I go to the Jacob House when I need help. And I knew I had to come here today. And I talk about the history all the time. But you feel like you're supposed to have something fresh to say and share. And I didn't know what I was going to do when I came here today. Truth be told, they don't say truth be told anymore. They say, for full transparency. I didn't even get my slides to Will until last night, right? So I'm panicked in a way. And I go to the Jacob House, and I'm thinking about the Jacob House and how every time I feel like I need help, I go there. And that's not every day. It probably should be. But I do. I go there, right? So I went there before. I went to Hampton, actually, before my first Juneteenth music festival. I went to the Jacob House when I did the Jazz in the Rain Garden event. And these were all first-time fundraiser events to pay our attorney that are now traditions. And I'm just like, oh, I didn't want to do a tradition. Oh, it's too late, right? Now they're traditions. So I go. I'm thinking about going, but I haven't gone. And so I'm getting ready to go to sleep one night, and it says, well, you haven't cleaned us up. And I said, oh, my goodness, I haven't. I hadn't been there to clean up because, the dust falls and the critters die, the bugs. And so I get up, and I take the vacuum cleaner to the Jacob House Wednesday morning, and I'm in there getting it done. My call comes in at 8:30. And I'm like, yes, right, we're going to this place, we're going to that place. I'm cleaning up the Jacob House, and I'm working, but I'm cleaning up the Jacob House. And so the next day comes, and I don't hear anything. And I'm like, I know you're going to help me, but you got to make me suffer a little bit. Okay, no problem. So I say all that to say, you say, why remember, why history? It happened a long time ago. I was not a person that was what I would have called invested in my history. I felt like I knew enough to get by. I didn't want to be pissed off all the time because I was already pissed off, right? I didn't need any additional help in that arena. And so then over the years, I'm a person that's not really about what's happening out here. I am an interiority girl. So I'm always looking at how to soothe myself. Like, how do I heal? How do I get myself together so that I can be more available to you? I didn't need no history for that. I had enough going on inside to do that work. Well, evidently, I had cleaned up and made too much space. And now the history is on me, right? So the history, your history is incredibly important. There is a level of excavation, depth to your being, and charge to your missions that you cannot appropriately and adequately address if you do not know who you are. And I really don't care how treacherous or ugly the story is. Right now, I'm playing around with reading the Red Book by Carl Jung. And Carl Jung, at some place in that book, says, what you're looking for is often in the place you don't want to find it. It's in the feces, the urine, the filth. So I just want to say, because I'm probably over time now, thank you for having the courage to lead. All of you are leading. You are leading the charge on a difficult history. You're leading the charge in your lives. Each of you is touching a whole world that none of the rest of us know anything about. And so I thank you for the courage to lead, for the courage to be in a conversation like this one is. I am incredibly grateful, however reluctant I am to say so, to be a member, part of the leadership team and the board. I am thankful, I'm grateful to you, Will, for the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project. It is the only organization that stood with us in our campaign to preserve and protect our community that had anything to do with racial justice. Everybody else was an environmentalist. And that's no shade against the environmentalist. It just lets you know that people have to fight from where they are, and that in all fights, we need armor. And so what you know about being here today is when you stand with a community, with people on the basis of race, you are essentially agreeing to get in the ring with no armor. So when it gets tough, don't give up. Find yourself a sexy environmental group and get in there, right? Hold on. Side 3.
You'll have to come back for the night session for that one. Oh, man. Whew. I need a moment here. So, I hope all of you, when you came in today, you got one of these very cool notebooks. I really like these, and I want to also thank Holly Siracos. Is Holly here? Holly's here. There she is, who did the graphic work for this, and thank you, Holly. And there's a reason I bring it up at this point in the program. Last year, Dr. David Fakunle, who is the chair of the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and the son of Deborah Pierce Fakunle back there. Thank you for being here. Dr. Fakunle introduced me to T. Marie King, and she had produced a really wonderful documentary called Shuttlesworth. I think Terry Scott mentioned it before. And it's about Fred Shuttlesworth. He's a civil rights icon, and we were hoping to do a screening with her and the film, and possibly have her appear at a conference last year or this year. Anyway, so a month or so later, I'm on the civil rights tour that the Institute of Common Power put on, which was life-altering. It was spectacular. And yeah, absolutely. I met T. Marie King. She was giving a session, doing a thing there, and I was completely just blown away by this woman. She was speaking to the group about her work there, and so she does more than she's more than an Emmy-nominated television producer, as it turns out. So she's an activist, trainer, a problem solver, and she's just got this combination of pragmatism and humility and common sense and a sense of humor. And I make that mention the notebook now is because I use these and I carry these, and I have I wrote down so much stuff. Whoops! That when she was talking, and the thing that I really remember that, and really I repeat a lot, is she talked about the need for having to find an on-ramp, different on-ramp for different people to get them into these conversations. And it's obviously, it should have been so obvious, but it's not. It's the kind of advice that I really value, and I'm thrilled that she's with us today, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Oh, here you go. It's your turn now, right? So you just, just hit the thing.
All right, so camera people, I'm going to apologize to you all first because I'm going to move around. And I understand the struggle because I used to do the camera at my church, so I understand having to move around people. But I like to move, right? Like, I know y'all just ate, but I'm going to move for you. How about that? Will that work? Awesome. So I'm T. Marie King. I do a whole bunch of stuff. You can Google me and read all the extra stuff if you're interested or not. But I was asked to kind of share, kind of some things about how my work has been shaped and how I try to enter in that space. So the cute title I came up with was Pathways to Understanding How Truth and Education Can Lead to Healing and Change. How long do I have? So I have all right. I can make it a Southern 10, we'll a Baptist 10, if y'all know what that means. We'll be here all night. My flight leaves at 6, so hope you got time. Awesome. So take a look at this picture. What do you see? And this is not rhetorical. This is like, you can shout it out. What do you see? Right. That's like a lot of us. We can't see past the things that are right in front of us. Our biases. People don't like the word prejudice no more, so I won't use prejudice. But, our biases, those things that block how we see not only other people, but also how we see situations. And he's doing a great job. I mean, he's capturing his essence, all of his sexiness. But if you look at all of his artwork, that horn is in the middle of it. And how often do we do that? How often do we place ourselves in other people's stuff? How often do we place ourselves in other people's conversations, in other people's stories, in other people's communities? And they didn't even send for you. You know what I'm saying? And we just show up, and it's like, they really need me here. And it's like, really? We do. Who sent for you? And that doesn't mean that your help may not be needed. Sometimes we place ourselves in a way that does further harm, right? And that's what we have to be honest about. So we have to do the work to get out of our own way and make sure that our biases are not causing us to make mistakes with others, okay? And so I said this one time in a session, and I was like, oh my God, that's profound. You got to use that again. And so what it is your world is not the world. You know what I'm saying? Your world, your personal world is not the world. Oh, hey, y'all up there. How y'all doing? Good to see y'all. I'll talk to y'all too. Your world is not the world. which means the way you're experiencing the world, your background, all of that stuff, that's not how everybody else has experienced it. So why is it so hard for you to believe that other people are being disenfranchised? Why is it so hard for you to believe that other people are being treated differently? Because you haven't been treated differently? Well, lucky you. That's beautiful. And so we have to make sure that we understand the way we walk through the world is not the same way other people are walking through the world. Does this make sense? Awesome. Let's see what else we got in here. All right, so there's 4 pillars that I kind of ground my work in. I've been doing social justice and racial justice work, and I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, y'all. Yeah, and I'm still there. So I've been doing social justice and racial justice work for about 15 years, going on 16 years now. And so these are the 4 pillars that ground my work. It's braving discomfort, self-reflection, deep listening, proximity, and action. So let's take them apart. Braving discomfort. I'm gonna tell you why I picked that one. Have you ever been in a session, and you may have led a session, and you say, this is a safe space? Has anybody said that or at least heard it? Show of hands. You've at least heard it. That's right, we're not gonna tell on ourselves today. And this is the thing. You can't guarantee that a space is safe. You know what I'm saying? You can't control nobody. You can't control what people say out their mouths. And somebody can say something and make somebody feel uncomfortable. You have no control over that. And then people be like, oh, they were lying. They said it was going to be a safe space. But for the people of those that, get a little extra and dramatic, also you got to understand that sometimes you go be uncomfortable. And that is also okay. And it don't mean you not unsafe because you in your feelings. I've been in my feelings about stuff my mama say to me before. But I'm still going to make my bed. I'm still going to do what she tell me to do. I'm going to just be mad about it. Right? And so sometimes we have to brave the discomfort. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to even be in your feelings. You just learned something new. I get it. This is new to you. But that doesn't mean it's not right. That doesn't mean you don't need to know it. So sometimes when we have these conversations that are a little harder to have, we got to be willing to come in the room and brave the discomfort. That's how we move and grow towards change. You already go through discomfort every day. You went through discomfort growing up. You know them growing pains they talk about? Your body starts stretching and all that stuff, and you feel it every little growing pains, but you don't want to stop growing, right? Right? Am I talking to myself, right? All right. There we go. Welcome back. And so we have to brave the discomfort. Next is self-reflection, and I think this is the hardest one for people to do when we're doing this type of work, because that means you got to look yourself in the mirror and evaluate how you're showing up in community and space. What are those biases that you bring into rooms that you're not thinking about that is coloring how you see and interact with other people? Why do I feel that way? Why did I say that? Why do I feel that way about their neighborhood? Why do I think they don't need to be talking about this particular thing? You need to ask yourself that. Why do I feel some type of way about that? Why does that make me feel funny? You got to do the self-reflection work and do the hard work of pulling those roots out so that when you go in the community to have these hard conversations, you're going in clear and can be a vessel that can be used for change. But if you're going in with your little secrets and your little feelings about certain things, it will come out in your work. It will. You ever heard somebody say something, you'd be like, dang, I can't believe so-and-so said that. Well, that was already there. The right situation just hadn't presented itself for it to come out. So you got to do the self-reflective work. And don't think I'm not telling you something I don't have to do myself. I've been in this work a long time. We got a lot of interesting stuff going on in the world, right? Like real, interesting, next week interesting. And sometimes I feel some type of way about certain things. And I have to make sure I do that work and making sure I'm continuously doing the reflection. I was just over in Japan for 12 days. I went with some high school students, and just watching their media talk about us. Y'all should watch international media, y'all. We be like, I wonder if they hiring over there. I did look for a job a couple of times, but I went too quick. My bad. I got excited. Self-reflection, deep listening. Now, some of us do a good job of using these handles on the side of our ears, on the side of our heads, right? And some of us don't do such a good job. We're not taking the time to truly listen. And listening is not just hearing what people are saying, being fully engaged and present in conversations. What does it mean to listen with your eyes? Can you watch body language? Do you know when the conversation shifted? Do you know when people kind of, zoned out of what you were saying? Are you listening with your heart? Are you being empathetic? Do you understand that just because you didn't experience that somebody may experience something that was very hard for them to deal with? Some people are carrying generational trauma, things that they carry with them all the time. Listening with your mind. Are you deciphering and understanding what people are truly talking about? Being fully present and not concerned with what's going on with this. Because if you're in your phone, you say, oh, I hear you. You probably do this with your kids. I know what you're talking about. I know what you want. Being able to truly listen is so valuable. I used to do work with our police department in Birmingham, and I would go into the academy, and we were trying to give people an understanding of the history of the racist police force of Birmingham in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Because we had a lot of these new young recruits coming in who had no concept of that, and a lot of them weren't even from Alabama, so they had zero clue. They were just coming in. It's like, I don't understand why these people don't want us in their communities. And it's like, well, these people now were the children who marched and them dogs and stuff, they grandparents now. They don't have an issue with you. They have an issue with that uniform and what it represents and what it did to them. So we had to give them that context. And then I would spend 2 hours with them doing listening exercises. And they ain't too much like that. I ain't gonna do that to you today. I'm gonna let y'all go. But in the exercise, we'll do these exercises, and I would have police officers, I would ask their feedback, and they was like, I noticed I try to finish other people's sentences. And I said, well, why do you do that? And they was like, I do it with my kids. I usually know what they want anyway. I was like, do you know how dismissive that is? I said, and how dangerous that is for you as an officer. You don't know what's going on at that scene. You've been given very basic information. And now you go show up and try to tell somebody what happened in their house? Or I have somebody say, well, I get lost in thought. They were doing one exercise, and it was like, tell about a memory, and this guy started talking about ice cream, and this guy was like, I thought about this candy bar I had one time when he was talking about nuts and stuff. And I was like, bro, stay focused. How often do we get lost in thoughts? We don't have control over our minds. I work with teenagers a lot. They definitely don't. They got these things on their hips. Y'all got them in y'all pockets or purses or bags. And we get so consumed in what's going on. Attention spans are not even long enough. Oh, we got to be shorter. Oh, we got to be shorter. Film industry is really dealing with it because folks don't want to watch long films. Give it to me quick. Don't even like long TV shows. Cut the commercials out. They ain't doing that. Capitalism is still alive. But what are we doing to actually truly listen to people and stay engaged? And then proximity and action. A lot of times people do real good about being proximate. Oh, let's go over and help this community. Let's go and help this group. Let's do this. Let's show up here. Let's read the book. I watched the film. I went to the talk. I came to the conference. But what is the action piece? Now, what are we going to actually change? What are we actually working to shift? And because of the nature of this convening, all of you are familiar, I'm sure, with Brian Stevenson and his work with the Equal Justice Initiative and everything that's been happening in Montgomery. And one of the things he talks about all the time is proximate, getting proximate to communities who have been traditionally or historically marginalized or oppressed. The thing I will say he left off in that conversation is what's the action piece? You can't just get proximate, you gotta get busy. You gotta do the work. And the work is not just on Tuesday. You with me? The work is not on just this coming Tuesday. It don't stop then. It don't stop when you cast your ballot. It should have never stopped from the last time. One thing I think we have a problem with in our nation is continuing education. And a lot of times when we do these types of convenings and things, no disrespect to organizers, a lot of times we're preaching to the choir. And it's like we got to get beyond the choir pews. We got to get out in the street where the folks are and letting them know this is why this is important to you. This is why this matters. And a lot of those communities who are disengaged, they feel as though it don't make it to me. Change is not trickling down to me. Nothing in my life has shifted or moved, so why should it matter? So we got to get proximate to those folks and also in action and getting them involved. Make sense? Awesome. And then you got to think about, what does it mean to share power? You ain't got to lead everything. I know you pretty and you got your new outfit. You look good. Like the t-shirts. But you ain't always got to lead it. Sometimes you need to lead from the back. How do you share power? How do you come in and bring the resources and say, hey, I got the money. I'll pay for the space. Y'all do what y'all need to do. I'll handle the food. I'll take care of transportation. Tell me what you need. A lot of times we get so excited and you want to do stuff, and that's great. But you can't lead movements in other communities, especially communities you're not a part of and haven't been invited in. Even if you want to go help folks, go and ask, hey, can I help? How can I be a support? And sometimes they may say, you know what, we need this, 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 and this. And sometimes they may be like, you know, I really don't need anything right now. We'll let you know. And that's not when you get in your feelings. You're like, see, I tried to help. T. Marie said, go get it proximate. And I went over there, and they was like, nah, we don't need you. That's not when you get mad. That's when you take a step back and say, you know what, well, let me wait to see when they call, and let me see what else I can be doing. That's when you got to brave that discomfort. It's okay. Some fights are not yours. And sometimes it ain't your turn yet. And you got to ask, who's missing from the conversation? Are we taking up space and somebody else need to be there talking? I've been doing youth work for a lot of years. And people say, hey, T. Marie, we're going to have a conversation about youth development and what's going on in the schools. I'd be like, that sounds great. And they'd be like, you should be on the panel. All right, cool. How many kids on the panel? Oh, well, actually, we don't have any kids on the panel. Well, how we going to have a conversation about youth development and what's going on in the schools with nobody that's actually in the schools? That makes so much sense. Well, you know what? I know kids. I'll bring them. I did one conversation, and we were talking about how to create space for people coming out of prison in Birmingham and making sure they got the supports that they need, right? These folks didn't want to have nobody who were formerly incarcerated in the conversation. I was like, what are we doing? I said, well, lucky for you all, I know some people. And I brought them with me. And we had a conversation. It was this group that was there, and they had, they were doing what they call ban the box, where you don't have to check a box that you got the felony, right? And these people, they were so proud of their shirts. They were like, their t-shirts were blue. They were so cute. I almost wanted one, but I knew better. And they was like, you know, we're doing this work, and we're going to ban the box. It's going to be great. So I had 3 people on the panel. All of them were formerly incarcerated for nonviolent offenses. I think one was sentenced to 114 years. One had like 37, and then the other one was like 120 or something like that, right? So they're sitting on there, and we're having this nice, lovely conversation. And, you know, they got these beautiful blue T-shirts on. So, you know, of course, it's like getting people's attention. And one of the ladies was like, see this mess right here, this ban the box? She said, that don't work. That don't help us. She said, y'all need to stop that. I said, now look, we're about being solution-oriented. So don't just tell them it don't work. Tell them why it don't work. And my friend Stephanie, who had received like the 30-something year sentence, she said, because you could ban the box, but you can't ban the background check. They go get me regardless. And now you did all this hard work and bought these T-shirts and went out registering people to sign up for that, and you going home patting yourself on the back, and you actually haven't moved the needle of change. I said, all right, but what should be done? Because we also had corporations in the audience. And she said, y'all corporations that want to hire people to work your poles, your line, your whatever, come interview us in prison. Those of us who are nonviolent offenders. You know we getting out. You know we got probation. You know we're trying to put our families back together. If you come interview us in prison, you already know what our background is because you visiting us in prison. So go on, interview us, hire us, so that way when I get out of prison, I have a job to go to. Now I got something to focus on and something to work towards. But we don't think like that because that's too much like right. But then we set them up for failure when we release them back into the community. And then those of us who are so cute and pretty, we don't want to be bothered with them. Even the ones that's our cousins, you knew what he did. But you don't want to be bothered by them, but we're not welcoming back in. It's real sweet to go to a little rally and to sign a little petition or something, but what does it mean to actually say, let me help you and let me leverage, let me share power, let me help you get a job. Let me connect you with the resources so that you can put not just your life, but your family's lives back together. Because it's not just those individuals that are coming out of prison, it's people behind them. They got families, they got kids, and they all got to heal and integrate back into society. So what does it mean to share power? What does it mean to say, let me leverage my resources, my relationships, so we can continue to push for change? And also sometimes let me make some people I know mad so we can push change. I'm telling you, we're coming up on the holiday season. People don't like to have the hard conversations around Thanksgiving dinner. We don't want to make Big Mama, Paw, Meemaw mad. But we know how they feel. But we won't have those hard conversations, but we'll show up to the community workshop. We'll go read the book, but we won't take a stance at our own family dinner table because you don't want to cause no trouble. So how are we sharing power? So these are some things I've done. I do probably too much. In the middle is my documentary film, Shuttlesworth, on the life of Reverend Shuttlesworth and his work. It's on PBS, so if you want to check it out, please check it out. We'd love for you to watch it. We got nominated for an Emmy. We should have won, but you know, I'm not bitter about it at all. But I think it's a real good film. I just recently stopped programming for Sidewalk Film Festival, our local film festival, but I fought for 8 years to create something I call Black Lens, and it was to bring more Black stories to the forefront. And what I was trying to get folks to understand that Black Lens wasn't just about Black stories coming to the forefront, it was also about other stories, Hispanic stories, Asian, indigenous stories. I knew if I can open the door for Black Lens that I can bring other people with me, right? So I did that. Down at the bottom at 16th Street Baptist Church is a tour that I was doing. So I also do civil rights tours and work with groups like Come Empower that was mentioned, Terry, earlier, that come and visit Birmingham. I'm a big fan of when you come to Alabama, a lot of times people, because of the work around EJI, people want to run to Montgomery. And please go, we want you to. And people run to Selma. But y'all should come to Birmingham as well. All those stories connect, and I'm trying to figure out how to connect Anniston as well in the conversation because that's a story as well. And then the Green Book Project. So I think you all heard from my friend Ashley Mann, maybe yesterday, some of you. I was on the founding board of the Jefferson County Memorial Project. And what we were doing was having these harder conversations around lynching in Birmingham. And I believe big time in giving people entry points into difficult conversations, right? So what does it mean to give people different avenues? Because everybody don't want to talk about lynching. It is not a sexy topic, right? Like, it's like, why do I want to come talk about that? I don't want to hear about that. That's going to make me sad. I don't want to be sad, right? So I've had people say that, and that was Black and white people. That was like, why are you bringing this conversation, T. Marie? Bring the other stuff you do. Like, let's talk about some of that other stuff. No, we're going to have this conversation on lynching, right? And so what we started doing was we were doing trainings on how to deal with traumatic history. And then we would do book discussions where folks who weren't going to come to the training, well, maybe they'll participate in a book discussion. We would do film screenings. We did a screening called Slavery by Another Name that kind of pissed some people off in my community because a lot of it is around convict leasing. And if you know anything about Alabama history and its industrial history, you know, the mines, TC&I, Sloss Furnaces, Sloss family is still around. So they had little feelings about me about, you know, showing that film, but we worked through it. We did art exhibits and just giving people entry points into the conversation. We started a college fellowship where our students even did research to learn more about that lynching history and actually find out who these people were. What were their stories? What happened to their families? But we had people in the community that was like, we don't want to get into that, T. Marie. We had one particular community where we had a lot of older residents that was like, I remember a lynching happening in my community. I don't want to talk about that. And I said, okay, well, what can we help you with? And they said, well, we got this quilting project we've been trying to get off the ground. And so when I took it back to my board members, they was like, T. Marie, what we gonna do with quilting project? I said, that's their project. We're gonna support them on it. So we gave them funding for it. And we said, just let us know how we can amplify what you're doing. And then they said, you know, we got this old cemetery over here they won't fix up. Can y'all help us with that? Yeah. So we started being vocal about the cemetery, went out and helped clean it up. Then got it on the news so people could see, no, their cemeteries need to be taken care of as well. Now, they still weren't ready to have the conversations about the lynching, and that was okay. Remember when I said people don't be sending for you all the time? They didn't send for us. We were responding to a different mandate. We went to them because we knew they had the history, but we also had to respect they weren't ready to have that conversation, and that was okay. They still haven't had that conversation, and that was okay. It's still okay. But you know what? We built trust with them because we saw what their needs was, and we said, well, you know what? We're going to respond to your needs. Let's help you with the things you've been trying to get off the ground that you haven't been able to. And then we slowly backed away. And then I had parents started saying, T. Marie, how do we have this conversation with our kids? And I was like, well, I don't know when to tell you to start talking to your children about lynching, but we can talk about why a community would need a safety manual. And so in Birmingham, the A.G. Gaston Motel was listed in the Green Book as a safe place that colored motorists could stop by. And at the time, our city had just started a redevelopment effort around the A.G. Gaston Motel to kind of rehab it and bring it back up so that people could actually start using it again. So I was like, we're going to use that as our catalyst. And at the time, we had, unfortunately, a young little girl who had been kidnapped that they were still looking for. I said, these kids know about her kidnapping. Let's talk about why people needed a safety manual. So I came up with the Green Book Project. So we do this with middle school students. And they get to learn the history around why you would need the Green Book, what was the history in Birmingham, what was the climate. So they're learning that information already in school. In 4th grade, they're getting that history. So it's like, why would you need that? Then they get to make their own Green Book covers, and then they write poems about the history. And so we're involving the art teacher, the history teacher, the English teacher, and then we're bringing in a local teaching artist, a poet, to help them actually write the poems. And so this program is in its 6th year, and we're getting ready to expand it into the high schools. And so again, creating entry points. It's about creating entry points for people to have difficult conversations on their levels. The things I talk about with adults, kids are not necessarily mature for it, but we can talk about it on their level in a special way. Let me see, did I have something else after? Oh yeah, this is the good one. So, and then I'm gonna open up for questions. I think it's important to understand you gotta be careful about the hero complex. Anybody, we got any DC fans in here? You like Batman and all that? We got 1 DC fan, 2, wow, 3, okay, we let y'all up there. Your people are upstairs, sir. Your friends, they're upstairs. They're upstairs. Marvel fans, we got more Marvel fans. Oh, you on both sides of the fence, sir? I'll talk to you afterwards. I'm a big Marvel fan. So what you have to be with the hero complex is when you think about what heroes do. For those of you who raised your hand, you watch Marvel, DC movies. What do heroes do? They save the day. What else? They would do what? They look out for their community. What else? They rush in. Dun, 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 dun. I'm here. They fight the bad people. They leave, but you know what else they do? They destroy. If you've ever watched Marvel movies, y'all watched Avengers, you saw what they did in New York. They tore that whole city block, they tore it up. They had things coming through the sky and just tearing stuff up. And then they went back to Tony Stark place. I was like, we did good. We saved them for now. But they destroyed it. And we have to be careful that we don't go into communities and destroy what people have because we got an idea or because they need to fix something or this doesn't need to be like that anymore. Let's just change that. Or that house doesn't mean anything. That could go away. You ain't from that community. You don't know what that house represents. Make sense? We got to be careful that we don't go into people's communities and start moving stuff around. Start discrediting things. Oh, that's not important. Oh, we can make it look better than that. Well, sometimes it ain't about what it looked like. Sometimes it's about what it represents. Pushing people out. What's that? What's the one in D.C.? The Flash. They run fast. That's the Flash. Y'all ever see how the Flash come in and he'll get people out of danger? He'll run off and move them out of danger and deal with the issue. Y'all know the Flash ain't never went back and got nobody. Y'all ever seen the Flash bring the person back that he took to Texas so they didn't get hit by the bus? Sometimes we do that in our work. We move people and we bring in the new development or the new thing. We don't think about going back and getting them. Or how do they participate? What does it mean for them to be pushed out and not be a part of it anymore? That's their community. That's where they lived. Now we shifted it. And it's like, oh, it's new, it's vibrant, it's bold. Look at this cool thing. Bring in the transient folks. Bring in the new kids. Bring in these new tech folks. We're dealing with this new tech thing in Birmingham, and it's like, we're not Seattle. And Birmingham hasn't got the memo yet, but you know. But that's what we do in communities because we got this great idea. Did we talk to the people that were there? Did we ask them what they wanted, what they needed, what was lacking? So I like to have fun, as you can see. But I also believe there's easy ways to have this conversation. I think you can create multiple avenues to have these conversations. But I think most important out of anything, braving the discomfort, doing the self-reflection work, taking time for deep listening. That means you don't talk, you listen. Getting proximate, figuring out what is the action. Being okay if people didn't send for you. Figure out what you can do at your place, to the side, with folks that believe or see things a certain way that you do it. Sometimes it's your turn to wait, not necessarily to lead. Figuring out how to share power. Give people entry points into the conversation. But also making sure you're not anybody's hero. Tina told us we don't need another hero. We don't. Take your invisible capes off. They don't go with the uniform for this work. Leave them at home. When you're working with people, you have to be centered on people. People have to be the focus. And at any time, if you're in this work and people are not the center of it, you should find something else to do. Because you will harm people. You will hurt people. You may look good, and it might look good on the gram, but are you truly helping? And anytime it's about you and not the people, it's ego. It's all ego. So don't be like these folks. And if you do be like them, just be like them on Halloween. Any questions? You got me for a few minutes before they take me off the stage. Any quick questions? No questions, really? Oh, in the back. Where do you do your workshops? Where do I do my workshops? Well, usually in Birmingham, but I am also a flight risk. So you can get with a group and be like, hey, we want to bring T. Marie in. I'll come in. My workshops are normally about 4 hours. But it's a time to really get real deep into the work. I don't videotape my stuff. I've had a lot of people ask me just video it, put it online. We talk about it. I know I'm funny. I'm like this in workshops too. But I understand a lot of the stuff that I'm bringing out brings out things in people that they don't want out there publicly. And I don't believe in harming people. And I'm not gonna put it online just because it'll get me an extra check. I don't believe in that. I value people too much. I'll give you an example. I was doing a workshop at home and elected official showed up. And I was surprised to see this person show up and I was like, what you doing here? And they said, well, people keep saying I'm a racist, so I came to see if I'm actually a racist. And I was like, well, this ain't that type of workshop. Like, I don't make those type of judgment calls, but, stick around. So, and I think this was a long one. It's like a 6-hour workshop. And so the person was leaving. I was like, yo, did you figure out, like, are you a racist? And they were like, well, I won't say all of that, but I learned that I don't talk like I should with people. And this person would use some interesting language when talking in their official role. Like, boy, don't girl, that don't fly. Definitely not in the South. Because, folks start having flashbacks and now we got a whole nother thing going on. And they said, I'm from a certain time and from rural Alabama, and I realize today there's language that is not okay. Now, if that's all they got out of it, great. Please use that going forward. And I watched that person over time, and they got better at how they talk to folks. And I think sometimes we will look at folks and be like, well, you should know better. And in theory, yeah, they should. But then when people in their circle and around them reinforce the behavior, they're in that echo chamber, they're like, well, everybody I know talk like that. Well, baby, that ain't okay no more. And so they were in a space that they were being brave enough to be able to hear the hard thing and shift and make a change. Now, what if I would have had cameras recording us in that session? That person would have never said anything, especially with them being an elected official. You ain't finna chop that up and put it back online so people can attack me. So, but again, I have a website. If you Google my name, it should pop up, and you can hit me up. And I see he's inching closer. So any other questions before they? Yes. I got it, baby. Don't worry about it. I'm good. Get them motivated to act. Mm-hmm. They don't know. They don't know. And see, that's the thing, because you got to educate them. But you got to make it fun. They got to see the history. Like, take these babies on field trips. Take them places. Let them understand the history. Like, because a lot of times they have no concept of it. Because, see, we all in this room, whether you want to remember it or not, we're all former teenagers, all right? Right. We've been that once before. And we forget that there was so much we did not know. And so when you're working with young people, you got to make it relevant to them. So I was talking to mine. Now, they're not old enough to vote, but I want them to still be, I'm tempted to take them all with me on Tuesday when I go vote, because they're actually out of school that day, and I actually might. And we were talking about voting. They was like, T. Marie, like, that stuff don't mean nothing to us. Like, we ain't thinking about it. I said, you know why you got the luxury to feel that way? It's because people ain't dropping bombs on us. If they was dropping bombs on us, you'll feel totally different. And a lot of times we got a lot of luxuries in this in this community, in our country, even with all of our drama. But we ain't dealing with things that other nations are dealing with. And when I started painting that picture for these 16, 17-year-olds, they were like, now how old we supposed to be to vote? Can I vote in November? I was like, this ain't your turn yet, but keep that same energy. And so you got to educate them. You got to let them know, like, this is how this impacts you. This is what that means. Like in Alabama and Birmingham, our history, a lot of our kids graduate and have no clue of our history, civil rights history or anything. And they're literally, and some of their grandparents were the Children's Crusade marchers, but they're not having this conversation. The same thing with Shuttlesworth. When we were working on that film, Reverend Shuttlesworth, all four of his kids became educators. None of them talked about what he did in the movement. His kids did not know, his grandkids did not know until his funeral. So when they came to Birmingham for the memorial, and I got this story when we were doing our research, if you've ever been to Birmingham, but you got 16th Street Baptist Church, across the street is the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, and outside of there is a statue of Reverend Shuttlesworth. And so they were getting ready to line up to go in to the funeral. And one of the grandchildren turned around and saw the statue and was like, why is that statue of Granddaddy? And they was like, well, Granddaddy was kind of a big deal. But they hadn't had the conversation. So we're not having these conversations with our kids about the history. We always say, well, we don't want to repeat it, but ain't nobody gave them the map. So we have to do it for them. And so that's educating them, making it relevant and applicable to them, and then letting them know you can do this thing. Like the kids in my program, they have to do community service. It's a part of it. You better pick an issue and you got to do something around it. But we don't give them a chance to participate. But then in a couple of years, we want to hold them responsible for the change we want to see. Get them involved. Like, let them make videos. These kids on TikTok anyway. You'll be surprised how quick stuff go viral. Like, once you teach them about something, or if you got an organization, what y'all doing over there on Water's Edge, invite some of these teenagers and be like, hey, do a little video and put it online so you can share with your friends. Let them be a part of educating others as they're learning. So I think that's my time. I think he's trying to give me the Baptist church finger. But thank y'all so much. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you so much. I'll let you do that. So I want to introduce you now to Lane Bond Hyman. She is a poet and an author whose family roots in Frederick date to the 19th century, I believe. Yes? She's the author of a collection of narrative poems called Catoctin Slave Speak, which is written in the voices of people who were enslaved at the Catoctin Furnace, which is an iron foundry that dates to the Revolutionary times, actually. And those of you who may have attended the Frederick County Soil Collection a couple of years ago, last year, may remember Ms. Hyman's beautiful recital there, and it's an honor to welcome her right now.
Thank you. Thank you all for hanging in here with me for a few minutes. I'm wearing a cape. And I'm woo-woo. I'm all woo-woo. So today is the Day of the Dead. Some people celebrating it, and yesterday was the day after All Hallows Day. And there are these moments when we honor the dead. And we're here today, remembering those who died and honoring them in our own way. And I'm here to honor some of my dead. I have two poems I want to read to you, if that's okay. One is the one that Will spoke of that I read before. It's honoring my own ancestors. I moved to Frederick County, Maryland from Washington, D.C. In 2012 to do the research on my family, step into my history, and I discovered that I thought I had a good life living in Greenbelt, Maryland, but there was a voice, a woo-woo voice that was saying, but you deserve a great life. You need a great life. And so in the last 12, 13 years, I discovered that I am the great, great, great granddaughter of people who survived everything and lived to tell about it. So I want to tell you the story of my great, great grandfather, Levi Hall. Seeing Levi Hall is the title of this poem. I appear this evening as a thief and a robber. I stole this head, these limbs, this body from my master and ran off with them. That's a quote from Frederick Douglass. The magistrate saw you. He looked you over and measured you from head to toe. He sized you up. He certified that you were the bearer of your own identity, a Negro man, free, about 33 years of age, with a scar on your left arm near the wrist. He saw that you were not branded. He said that you had no other perceptible marks that he could see. He kept close tabs on you. He wrote down your name in his book. He gave you a piece of paper from his book with his writing on it, and that you had to carry, but you couldn't read. It was not the first time. His sheriff saw you, black boy of 15, lined up with your pa, counted on the rolls of free black males just in case the legislature needed to round you up and send some black men back to Africa. Oh, he saw you. He didn't see that you came barefoot across South Mountain, following buffalo trails and small creeks that fed into the Potomac. He didn't see that you loved a woman named Caroline, that shared 6 children with her, that you built a house and made a home, that you cleared the land, that you grew the wheat and corn, that you fed your neighbors and family, and that you plied the C&O Canal. He didn't notice that you had aging parents who counted on you, a brother who always lived nearby because he had no seeing eyes and you did. Though he watched you, he didn't ask if you wanted to be shipped across the ocean back to Africa, to Liberia, because his people were coming from across the ocean, from Europe, from Ireland, from Germany, and they wanted the work you did would take the land you bought without paying you for it. He only saw the way your eyes were cast down, that you shifted on your feet or wrung your hat in your hand and hunched your shoulders when he looked at you. He didn't see you laugh. He never saw you cry or shout or sigh. He didn't see you. He didn't want to see you. He was afraid to see you. I see him. And because I see him, I see so many others. And this second poem I wrote for you and for me, because I see not just, oh, I am that woo-woo person that is both black and indigenous, okay? So I'm bringing 2 consciousnesses, or maybe even 3, to this moment in my personal history and until our collective history. And so today I've chosen to write a poem for you that's coming to you from the lynching trees that we saw photographs of. I read the statistics, and I looked for the word tree whenever it was mentioned. And this is that poem. This is that message from the lynching trees. Here, on Turtle Island's back, now called Mary's Land, we stand. Seasoned by the seasons, we lost our innocence. Woodlands stand unseeded. Perhaps you've heard of us. Cherry, hickory, poplar, pine, pin oak, sycamore, locust, and willows that weep. We cycled many sun trips round despite the colonizers' axe. We felt their saw strip down our sides, flaying fleshy bark. Tuscarora, Shawnee, Piscataway, Delaware, First Nations fled. Though left for dead, we bled. Saplings into soil, a record of remembering deeds done. Wailing women coiled our trunks while on leaf-littered dirt they sat, into burden baskets and sleeping mats, grading our willowy limbs. We winced at being cut and scored, made into tables and chairs. We understood the way they felt, objects turned into stairs, bent down for another's climbing. Listen to our forecast tunes of weather dissonance harmonic, window rattling gusts that croons dirges rooted in mist demonic. Ancient leaves sing whining songs, hear our secret messages whispered in rasps and scrapes as skin is torn and fingers bound from which there are no escapes. Oh, we have tales to tell. In springtime, when our tiny leaves made muted sound, you hardly heard us speak. With gasps and rasps like gossiping grass, we told you of the meek. As two Jameses, a John Asbury swung on breeze, fan panicked and shushing leaves, anxious. In summer, though fat and limp with heat, flapping in the wind as storm advanced, 11 dangled in July, yet none in August danced. Then in September, 2 filled up our high-up crowns, dragged, shot, swung upside down, so limp and fat and scorched with thirst, we waited for a cleansing rain. None came. Fiery autumn's leaves of orange and gold dove down deep as 15 of them fell. We chattered in Poplar's gossip grove, some 44 tulip tales to tell. The slung-up ropes draped Cherry's thick arm, her bough, though stout, she meant no harm. On woodland's edge where she grew broad, her smooth and red-brown bark peeled off as stiffened bodies dropped. Strong, hardy hickory's branch was hacked for smoking meats and cooking. His bonfires could also burn the flesh of those caught fleeing. And we have tales to tell. Of lovers lain beneath our shade, of laughing young ones chasing round, of barking dogs chained to our trunks, of bodies strung up in our crowns, with bulging eyes and purple tongues, legs trembling, then gone limp. Of cheering crowds in Sunday suits with children strapped on shoulders high, of picnics spread on blankets quilt and swatted flies buzzing round the blood-soaked legs of blacks and browns. Oh, here we've known great horror, standing as we do enrooted in stolen Mary's land, gone limp and weary too. First Nations fled, betrayed and plundered, once proud warriors forced surrender. We heard the cries of blacks and browns, called fiends and brutes, monsters of the piney woods, all of ill repute. We sniffed their rotting bodies hung, caressed their strangled necks that swung. As farmers' wives and white little girls, their violence by sheeted men unfurl, and patty rollers hound the heads of woolly-haired black boys. There were no trials, nor justice sought for bodies black and brown, and sheriffs turned their heads away from body-broken boys. In winter, no sad respite came. Instead, we met Jim Crow. And so, with aching arms and curling leaves, we hid their shame beneath the years. Squalls blew a cooling balm upon the frosted hearts of relatives who went to sleep, afraid to weep or mourn, lest tears and sorrow wipe away the scourge of being born. Recording these atrocities is tiring work we do. But telling truth sustains our growth on ravaged land through flood and drought. In name of law and sought justice, shout! Horizons change. Our time is now. to witness what we've seen. Let willows cease their weeping and tongues be loosed to speaking, lest we return to days gone by, reliving scenes obscene.
This is a difficult transition. We're going to talk a little bit now about the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Many of you have been watching, following its progress, know that it's been an active fall as it works to complete the schedule of public hearings as mandated by the General Assembly in 2019. And here to provide an update on its work is the man who actually helped write the bill, Dr. Nick Creary, who's our vice president and represents us on the commission. He's the Institutional Justice, this is a title, this is Institutional Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, which is conveniently located in Monterey, California. So he's one of the founding directors, and I welcome him now.
Okay, thank you, Will, and thank you all for coming and for your constant patience and support and encouragement of our work. Let me start my timer here, because I want to make sure I don't go over my 10 minutes. But as you can see, we have here a list of all of the hearings that we have done and that we have scheduled, and I look at this and I'm just sort of reminded of, going back to high school science class, learning the chemical reaction, the energy of activation. It's like 90% of a chemical reaction's energy is the energy of activation. In other words, the time that it takes to get to the point where the reaction happens, and then it just goes. And I'm feeling like that's kind of where we are. We've been at this since 2019, and you can see the hearings that we've had, and now the ones that we have coming. It's just like boom. Mark your calendars. I'm looking at a whole lot of frequent flyer miles coming as a result of this. I'm working on a couple of them, the ones for Howard and Carroll counties, as well as the institutional and reconciliation hearings. So I'm kind of feeling like, wow, I'm working on 3, although I shouldn't complain too much because Amy Millen, there you are, our logistics committee chair, she's involved in all of them. I don't know when you sleep, but I am eternally grateful for your efforts and for the work that you're doing, so thank you. There are lots of other people I could and should be thanking, but I will just thank everybody, part of the commission and the staff from the Attorney General's office, without whom we could not do this. And as Will and several other people have said, we would be nowhere without the support and collaboration of the local county coalitions. So thank you all with whom we have worked. Apologies to those of you whom we have perhaps offended or slighted or have not treated as you well should be treated. But this is very much a learning process. I kind of feel like we're building the train as it's moving, so I am grateful for your patience with us. As far as, so you have the hearing schedule, take pictures, get it on your calendar. The other thing that I can certainly talk about, since I chair the Reconciliation Committee, is we're starting to have some fun conversations. We're in the process of trying to hire someone to write the final report because That's going to be due in 13 months, and I can't believe, hence that schedule. But we're working on that, so whoever is going to be writing this is going to have to sort through all of the data that the research committee has accumulated and is continuing to accumulate. And again, a quick shout out to David Armenti. I don't think he's here today, but he's the chair of the research committee. So I want to give him a shout out and his colleagues in the work that they've been doing. And so on the reconciliation side, we're starting to talk about reparations, and particularly what kinds of reparations and to whom should those reparations go. And if you would like to join in those conversations, you are certainly welcome to do so. We usually meet the first Friday of the month, 3:30 East Coast time. But because of the workshop we were doing yesterday, we pushed that back to next Friday. So if you want to join that fun, just hop on the commission's website, click on the Zoom link, and you can join that fun. What else? We are working, we've had a couple of interns from the University of Baltimore Law School work with us. We are putting together lists of expert witnesses that we would like to have testify or provide testimony. We're also looking at, getting witnesses and, people, representing institutions like newspapers, like the Baltimore Sun, that had more than a little to do with creating that culture and climate in which racial terror lynching was not only permissible but encouraged. We're talking about, sort of getting the legal community, whether it's, state's attorneys' offices and or local and state police departments, and again, we want to invite people, but, since we flexed our subpoena power last year, I'm feeling a little emboldened to say, it's like, well, we'd like you to come and testify, and if you don't accept our invitation to testify, we can hit you with a subpoena. We got records from the city of Salisbury last year. It wasn't quite what we were hoping to get, but they produced the documents. So, I don't have a problem asking the Attorney General's office to issue subpoenas to get the people we want to hear from to show up. So, as I've said before here and yesterday and other places, I'm about the accountability of it all. Yes, memorials are important. They're a good first step. We're never going to get justice, but we can have some accountability. And let me see, how am I doing on time here? Oh, hey, I still got under 4 minutes. But yeah, I am all about the accountability piece. As I said, going back to my days when I was working at Bowie State and driving around the state and, going up 270, it's like, oh, there's Poolsville. That's where George Washington Peck was lynched. Driving along Route 2, oh, that's where George Briscoe was lynched. And sort of, I could not drive around this state and not have the map of lynchings not, sort of impinge on my consciousness. So yeah, I'm looking for accountability, still am, hoping that we will get a measure of it. And yes, I encourage you all to participate to the extent that you want to and are able to. Again, we're trying to be as transparent about this as possible. So I will stop there, and in the roughly 3 minutes that I've got left, if you've got questions, comments, or criticisms, I'm happy to entertain them and try to provide answers. Yes?
Thank you for your remarks. I know the general idea of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but I'm wondering, how are the public hearings going? Are you getting people to come and testify?
Yes. Yes, we are getting that information. And the other thing is, if you go to the commission website, the recordings of all of the hearings that we've done thus far are there. So if you want to watch them, aside from the ones that we've just had, there are also transcripts. So if you don't want to watch, you can read, the transcripts there. And again, we've had some wonderful help from a colleague, Professor Michelle Gowerk at Loyola University here in Baltimore. She and her students have been working on making sure those transcripts are clean, and they're fantastic. So yes, we have the histories, and again, this is where the local coalitions and the local historians who have been doing that research, that's usually the first thing we do, is to give the full histories, to the extent that we have them. And then we bring in the testimony of whether it's descendants or expert witnesses to provide that information. And so, yes, Reconciliation Committee will have lots of material to work with. Yeah, in the back, your hand went up next.
Where is Baltimore City?
Baltimore City is an interesting situation because technically, and I'm trying to remember, was it 1911, King Johnson, yes, was lynched in what is now the city of Baltimore, but at the time it was part of Anne Arundel County. So technically, were there lynchings in Baltimore City? Officially, no, but we could certainly say yes. But I think the other thing that's important to remember about Baltimore City is that's where a lot of the people who ultimately were lynched were initially taken for safety so that they wouldn't get lynched. But on their return, of course, were. So Baltimore City, although we don't have hearings per se for people who were ostensibly, or whether or not they were lynched in Baltimore City, it plays an important part in the stories of several of these cases. Yes. Okay, last question. Yes.
Hi, I'm from Eastern Maryland, and we have a family member that in 1958 or 59 was lynched in Easton jail. This is new information, is that something that you or someone in this organization would be interested in?
I'd be very interested in that. If you've got information, if you go to the commission website, there is a link that you can click on so you can share that information. Please share it with us. We will get it to the research committee. And here again, although technically the legislation deals with lynchings from 1854 to 1953, if we have document, or we can verify and document, another case of racial terror or lynching that happened after 1933, I don't have a problem including that or finding a way to justify including that kind of information in the work that we're compiling. So please do share that with us through the commission website. And I will stop there. Thank you.
So many of you know, I'm sure, that Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melnick introduced as the primary sponsor for the bill that created the commission. And she spoke at our very first conference here 6 years ago, and she's been at almost all of them since, but she's out knocking on doors in Pennsylvania today, so that's, I think, a more urgent cause. But we're very fortunate to have the delegate's chief of staff with us, Edith Perry. She's no stranger to these gatherings. She comes every year, and she has been a wonderful friend and steadfast supporter of the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project, and here she is.
I'm basically here to bring you greetings from Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, who's also chair of Health and Government Operations for the state. We attended the first conference here, and I immediately told Jocelyn, you got to put that bill in. And that bill was passed by all 144 delegates and all 45 senators. It went through very quickly, very quickly. I'm here because it also helps me heal. I'm here on the back of Caldonia Kellogg, my grandmother who raised me. She's no longer with me, but I try to say her name every day to remember. So I have an ask of all of you. As you sit down at your dinners, or holidays are coming up, Thanksgiving, talk to your family members about their history. Help them understand how great they are. We're in the backs of champions that can live through this. Right now, yesterday, I went to a hearing with a constituent to get a peace order because of a hate crime in her community against her, being the only black in a new community in Frederick. Stuff is still happening, guys. It's still going on. We've got a lot of work to do. This is going to be a phenomenal election, but on the 6th, we've got work to do, okay? We've got legislation we need to pass. And if through any of your committees, if there's a legislation, if there's a bond bill request, because I haven't seen a bond bill request come through to Delegate Jocelyn Payne-Melnick asking for money to help your organization succeed. Send the bond bill request in to your local delegation. They have monies that can be dispensed. Ask for it. Put the ask in. Call your local delegation. Your county council has money. Your state senators have money. Your delegates have money. Put the ask in. I have not seen anything. I need to see a lot of them. Also, I want to share with you something that that has helped me through the years. And I got this from my grandmother. Leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence. Think about that. Leadership is about making things better because you're there. And making sure that once you're gone, it continues. It's ongoing. Have another ask. When you call your state delegates or your community leaders and constituent and ask for something and they send an email and they give them a link that they should call, I want you to call that chief of staff back and say, you've given me a link. Who's at the other end of that link that I need to speak with? Too many times we accept mediocrity. I need to not only you get the link to help, but you want them to be able to call on the other end and whom you're going to speak with that is waiting for your call. That's all I have to say, but thank you for all that you do, because I know this is tough work. And I didn't know I had to speak today, or I had something prepared. I didn't know until I came in and I looked at the agenda. I'm like, oh, crap. But remember what leadership truly is. You're all developing a legacy. Help your family understand what that is and your neighbors. And when you reach out and help, truly do that completely. Treat people like you want to be treated. Because like I said, I have 2 hate crime cases that I'm working on. It's scary. Take care.